Hey there, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in today's video, and if you're like me, you're probably a traditional painter. Well, in this video, I want to introduce you to an amazing digital tool that will help enhance your traditional painting process and even replace some parts of it, or maybe all of it, who knows. Well, this video is sponsored by Clip Studio Paint, a software I've been using for a couple of years now. If you remember, I have shown you in the past my manga process, where I use Clip Studio Paint for my sketching, inking, and mostly the toning stage of the manga pages. Well, recently I discovered that it has a few amazing tools for us painters that can really help with the painting process. And this is what I want to introduce to you today. Before we get to it, be sure to check out the link here in the description box below to check out Clip Studio Paint. More on that in just a few seconds. So first off, let's talk a bit about digital painting for us traditional painters. Watercolor, which is my main medium of choice, is really like a roller coaster. You get started with the process and you kind of have to see it through. There are few stop points where you can take a break, but because of flow and because it is time sensitive, it really is like a roller coaster. The advantage of digital tools is that they allow you to step out of that and really properly prepare yourself and study the scene you're gonna paint. And there are endless of advantages to that, where you don't need to waste a bunch of paper, you don't need to waste a bunch of paints, and there are tools to make the process very effective. So if I want to do a study of a scene, if I want to familiarize myself with it, do a lot of different compositions and thumbnails, this is really a great tool. And let me show you how that works. So here's a scene I plan on painting. This is actually a picture I took myself. You know I love cityscapes and I love that nice little contrast and the light shining through between the buildings. And usually what you'll do is a couple of thumbnail sketches, a couple of value studies, compositional studies, just to figure things out and ultimately become more familiar with the scene, so that when you're gonna paint it, you know exactly what you're gonna do. So let me show you how easy this process is in Clip Studio Paint. So here I have a new project open. This is super easy, by the way, to set up. So I'll show you a few of the tools, because this entire interface is full of features, but it's very simple to learn. So one of the tools I like using the most, or some of them, are the pen, right? The pen, this is a great tool, sensitive to the pressure I apply. There are tons of markers. Pencil, that is extremely useful with different ways of mimicking paper. We have watercolor and other paints tools, and we have an airbrush, which is super useful. I'm going to show you a bit of that later on. But what I want to show you is, again, how to get prepared for a painting, whether you do it traditionally or fully digitally. This is just a great way of doing that. So using my pen, I'm just gonna draw this kind of a canvas. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Now, let's say I want to do a few compositional studies. Well, this is super simple. So this is my, let's say, frame, I'm going to call this, and I have my reference photo on the other screen, which is super comfortable. I'm just going to take this frame, I'm going to copy and paste it and have one more here so that I can do multiple iterations. So let's look at how I'm going to do that. I'm going to zoom in a bit. And all of this is super simple. The interface has been perfected for comfort. So I'm going to use my pencil here, and I can just do some kind of a compositional study. So let's start with a horizon line. Maybe that's where I want to place it, and I want to stay loyal to the composition I'm seeing. So we have one building here, and then the other building is going to be somewhere around there. And this is very intuitive to draw using this interface. It's very simple, very similar to real life. And then I'm going to put this in, and look at how, again, it's sensitive to the pressure I apply, so you can get multiple different types of lines, right? And then let's do the gap between the buildings. There's a strong highlight here. You have the undo button for everything that you want to fix, any mistakes. I'm going to set up the perspective, and look at how easy it is to set up a perspective that maybe the vanishing point is outside of your paper. Much easier to do this digitally. Then we have, let's say, this car here, somewhere around here. It's not going to be perfect. I just want to show you the compositional aspect of it and how easy it is to do iterations, right? So here's the windows, here's this part of the car, right? Then we have another car right here, and I'm doing this exactly as I would on paper. And then we have another car right around here. And we have, of course, the buildings and some other cars on the other side here. And this is pretty much it for an initial sketch. Now let's say I want to do it a little differently. I want to play around with the horizon line and move everything around. So let's do another attempt, and this time let's lower the horizon line to make a bit of a more, let's say, balanced scene. So here's our horizon line. Now let's say I want to move the buildings to the right just to make more of an reverse L composition, which I can show you and then get rid of using the undo button. Super convenient. So I'm going to put my lines here. Now this is a little different than drawing, let's say, on real paper. The touch screen works a little differently depending on the platform you're going to use this on, but this is it. It takes not a long time to get the hang of it. I did practice it a bit, and I feel really confident with it. So now let's get this car here a little lower, and let's place another one here and another one there and a few more details. And now you can explore this bit of a different composition, right? Now let's say I want to get another one down. Let's do something completely different. So let's just put maybe one building here. This is going to be sky, and then a few other buildings and the ground. Now let me show you where this really shines, because right now I can do more prep work using this. I can actually show you some values. So let me switch over to the pastel tool, which I really like for this purpose. I'm gonna make it a little smaller, and then look, this is dark, right? So I can switch over to a lighter value like this, and you can actually approach this just like watercolors. You can go from light to dark as you please. It's just a really comfortable, convenient tool that helps you get this stage done really well, very softly. Again, and let me just darken everything that should be just a little bit darker. Now, because this is digital, you can play around with the layers. You can put it under the pencil, above the pencil. You can do whatever you want here. That's the thing. You have a lot of freedom. You have the undo button, of course, where you can fix tons of mistakes. And this is such an easy kind of iterative tool. Let's say I added shadows and now I want to move the composition. I can just grab this whole thing and just move it around and try and figure out what would look best, right? You can't really do that on paper. You can do that, and you know, I love traditional, but this is just a completely different and very effective way of doing things. And I can do the same here. These are two buildings set to the side, right? I'm going to do this a bit rough in the beginning, but we'll get some more details in later on. The last one is going to be just one building, right? So we remove the building, and let's see what it looks like with a gap here to the right. That's kind of what we can test out. We also remove the car, right? Now look at what happens here. For my next layer, I can start darkening everything a bit more. So I'm going to grab a bit of a stronger value. And if you don't want to use the chalk tool, and there are tons of them, pastel, there's just a bunch of them, like a crayon. This is huge. Let me make the brush smaller. You can play around with everything, sizes of brushes, whatever it is. You can do whatever you want. You can use a different one. For example, I really like the airbrush. And then you have a few types. You have the harder tip, and you have a softer tip. And let me go ahead and just darken some of these buildings. I want to show you how fast this can take shape. This side of the car, undo button. Let's get this darker, this darker. I want to show you one that feels a little more complete, just to give you a sense of how deep you can go with the studies here. You can do so much. Super impressionistic, right? But it still starts to take a bit of shape. Now, let's say I want to bring back the highlights. So let's do another layer, call it highlights. And then for the highlights, I'm just going to use white paint. I can use the same tool, or if I want something sharper, I love using the pen actually. So then you get that highlight in the middle, or you could use an airbrush if you want to get a bit of a softer edge, of course. And then the light shines through, and look at how easy it is to put in these different, you know, glass effects or whatever it is. I took this picture actually through a bus glass, so this is why. Yeah, let's stay on the airbrush. Make it a little bigger. I wonder if I want to use the soft or the hard one. Let's use the hard one. And then I'm just starting to establish some of the darker values. See? And this will start giving it structure. And I'm being quite fast here because this still is, to me, a study, right? Look at how fast you can put in those details, get that cast shadow, get these shadows down here. And the more time you put into it, of course, the more accurate it's going to be, and the more details you can get in, and you can start becoming really granular. And I'm going to show you this in just one second. Now look at as I add a shadow, I don't erase the highlight because the highlight is a level above that, which is really useful. Now, let's get rid of a few more highlights. So I'm going to bring my white, and I'm going to rotate, because I can rotate, work with the natural direction of my wrist. Oops, moved too many layers, and open Siri at the same time. Let's get rid of that. Let's get back this highlight on top of the car here.
And we have a few more highlights here. And you can always sample the color if you want to get it more accurately. But here it is, generally speaking. And look at how it starts to really take shape. Now again, if you want to go more granular on the details, or you want to darken some things, or you want to improve some stuff, it's really possible. Let's say, let's start a bit more rough here with a few details, let's say on these buildings here. Few of these things. Now under the car we probably have some stronger shadows. Let's go to our airbrush, get a few of these darker shadows under the cars. Doesn't even matter really exactly what there's there. If we want to go darker here, we can go over these areas like that and really start bringing out some details here. The mirror is clearly very dark, a few shadows here and there. Get a highlight back by going back to a white pen, going back to our highlight layer. And you don't even have to work in layers, you can kind of wing it, which is also fun to do. Once in a while, if you want to be more organized, you can. But all I'm showing you right now is just studies. Look at how beautiful this looks already, right? I love this. And then bring a few highlights back on the car. Look at how sensitive it is to my touch. Strong touch, weak touch, and you can really control this very easily. A few other details, you get the tail lights if you want, that light up here, and it really starts to take shape. Now let's do the exact same thing for this one, right? So this is a different composition, so let's see how this is going to work out. And by the way, I forgot there's a bit of a nice little highlighted area on this building with a gap that's darker. Look at how beautiful this is. We haven't even gotten to colors, right? We haven't even gotten to using this as a watercolor tool. Look at how amazing this is. So let me now do a bit more of our pastels here. Or let me switch, let's do airbrush. And this is one big shape I see. I see another big shape with the light pouring through, of course. This is a big shape. Here we go. And we got some big shapes in. And then we can start carving it out. And again, you can get as granular as you want. Do you want to really get that highlight over the car? Super accurate. You can draw in more detail, first of all. But you can really start creating the shape of the different windows if you want to. Different highlights here on the window, above the tire. You can really try and get those shapes to be accurate. Let me show you something really cool. So I got this shape in, and again, I can do undo for everything, go back a few stages if I mess something up, and let me put in that antenna that goes kind of, and it's lighter. I went a little too excited. You see? You got the antenna in, and you can do this iterative study more and more and more. You can change things around. You can just do whatever you want. Let's say you like what you did in one of them, but not in another. So I'm going to grab a frame, and then I think I did something weird with the settings. I'm going to play around with it later. It doesn't matter as much, though. So here's our frame, and then let's say from the pastel layer, or from the pencil, I really like the way I did this area here, right? So I can just grab that area, bring it here, and by the way, look at how cool this looks without a pencil. And then I can say, okay, but I really like my pastel work here, so I'm just going to grab that and move that here. You see? And you can just do whatever you want with it. You have so many options, and that's how you can do a lot of iterative studies of different compositions, different shapes, and figure out what's the perfect one for you to paint. I had a suspicion that I loved the way I took the picture because I took it. So I'm just going to do this one. And I know, and I'm super prepared to tackle it. I have all of my different layers and the way I created it. And that's exactly the structure I'm going to use for my finished painting.
So after doing all of these studies, I'm much better prepared to tackle the final piece, right? And you can see how the digital tools make this process much easier. Simply having the undo button is a game changer for me. And then you can take the real piece of paper, physical, and get to work. But what if we were to paint this entire process digitally? I want to show you how I do that in just 1 second, but before that, as I mentioned, this video is sponsored by Clip Studio Paint. Very proud to be sponsored by them. And if you want to have that powerhouse of a digital tool to enhance your painting process, to do a lot of studies, to replace some aspects of your traditional process, and maybe even replace all of it because it's just really fun. And there's a lot of fun in that freedom. Be sure to check it out. The link's going to be here. It's going to be in the description box below. The software is available on multiple platforms. You've seen me use it on a tablet together with my Mac. Mac, but you can actually use it on an actual tablet, paint directly and draw directly on the screen, such as an iPad. Check it out. All the links, all the details are gonna be in the link itself, and you can get up to 3 months of free use. So check it out. Use this to enhance your traditional process, even replace some parts of it or all of it, or do it as an additional way of creating without wasting or using any physical materials, which is pretty awesome. And with that, let me show you how I paint the full thing.
Okay, so one thing, the main idea and motif you'll see here is freedom, because this software, unlike traditional tools, will give you that freedom to do whatever you want. So we're just going to jump through the drawing stage using time-lapse, because you kind of saw me drawing the scene already. But what you'll notice is choosing colors, changing the sizes of the brush, editing stuff that you already put on paper. All of these things can be very easily changed, and a big part of that freedom actually is what makes digital painting so effective. One thing I will note, and I probably mentioned this later on, my color matching has improved greatly over the last couple of months thanks to this, surprisingly enough. So here's what I did here. I put a layer of yellow, kind of like an underpainting, and then I locked the transparent pixels is what it's called, or I didn't even have to do that. Basically, I use my airbrush to change what's already there and to add a bit of blue on top of that. And I find that using the airbrush that is soft over an area that you filled with paint really mimics watercolor in a very interesting way. Of course, it's going to be very different. It's not going to be completely traditional, but the way this works is actually quite close. Now, what you see me do is using the watercolor brush called Paint and Apply. This is one of my favorites because look at what I'm doing here with the edges. It's so smart. You have no idea. After just playing around with it a bit, you realize exactly how to create soft and hard edges. It gives you so much freedom. And again, nothing's going to be exactly like the physical act of painting, whether you're using watercolor, oil, or anything else, but these tools allow you to create a look that mimics it very closely and basically allows you to create the whole thing digitally and then play around with it, manipulate it, and then you can paint it the same way you did on paper if you want to again. Now, I'm doing the same thing, kind of dropping in using the airbrush. This time it was the hard airbrush, a few details into an area I already painted. You can use the lock transparent pixels function. If you search for it, you'll find how to do that, to edit just an area where, and you'll see it on the right side, it's really marked, and I'm gonna make sure to mark it for you so you see exactly where it is, lock transparent pixels. And the way this works is, again, it gives it that kind of watercolory style in a way with the gradual transitions. Now, there are some effects that will get you closer to a watercolor look, but I'm actually a big fan of using this software in a more hybrid way. So I'm not necessarily just trying to mimic a specific look, but rather I try to achieve the result that I want. Right. Now, I'm starting to work on the foreground a bit, the car here, and what you'll notice is the most fun process is to work in small patches. Once you set up some large shapes, you can really devote yourself to an area, like this car, for example, and really tighten things up. You see, I'm brightening things. It's not an issue here, painting light on dark, not an issue at all. All you have to do is do it, right? You can do light on dark, dark on light. And if you look at the preview on the top right corner, you'll actually see that this starts to seriously take shape. And now, using a pen, I'm designing a few of the smaller details, just like I would use a small brush, and really bringing in some structure to it. Now, mind you, you can work in layers, different layers, and you can do a lot of cool things with these layers. Look at how I'm blending, how easily you can blend using this tool. You can work in different layers, make one disappear, bring it back, make sure everything looks right. Here I am painting the highlights physically on the darker areas and really bringing out that the middle section is so light, it's almost paper white, right? Paper white. And on top of that, in the edges, you can add a bit of that creamy kind of orangey or peach, but very muted, you know. Same here, adding that tyrant. Don't worry, we're gonna tighten things up. It's like step by step, just like painting physically. You want to trust the process, and you want to know that as long as you follow the shapes you see, it will connect. And again, if you look at the preview in the top right corner, it's already connecting very well. There's already a great sense of three-dimensionality, of depth, everything. This car I'm especially proud of because I got it to look just like I imagined. And all of this is by treating things as shapes once again. And it's funny because that freedom of just sampling any color you want, or look, and I didn't even sample, I just look and match. It can be very overwhelming in the first 5 minutes, but once you get used to it, this is so fun. And it allows you to experiment much more easily and less bound to the physical world, right? You have the undo button, which I cannot stress enough how useful it is. Again, painting those highlights over the shapes. And I'm being now just fun and kind of enjoying myself loosely in a way. At some point, I decided to take a bit of a looser approach with this one and just put the details there and not overthink it. And it was great fun. I kind of see this as alla prima painting in a way. And look at adding the highlights here, just a very bright red, and then surrounding it or overlaying it with some darker red, but still quite light. The middle of those highlights is just white. And there are a lot of tools, and I'm going to show you in just 1 second how you can select an area and change that and play around with that. But I want to show you something. Right now I'm painting the sky blue, and I went over the building. So look at what I'm doing. I'm playing around with the layers. I'm bringing back only the sketch or drawing layer where I can see the buildings, and I erase where I want to, right? And I could do this under the layer of the buildings too, which means I wouldn't go over them. But again, I'm doing this kind of hybrid process, very alla prima, very fun. Look at how fun it is to add the side of that curb side with the dashed line. Just fantastic, such a fun process. And in addition to that, you can do a lot of, so here I'm just getting a few of the windows in very loosely, but you can do a lot of things with it, like actually editing an area using filters, or you can blur things, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment. How you can, again, you know how you want to blend the edges and make them soft in the background. You can just literally mark and highlight an area and do it. So there's a lot of ease that comes with that. And I think, honestly, the more I play around with it, this is a medium in its own right. It really is. And you can do so much with it. So look at what I'm doing here. I'm adding some highlights for those cars in the much, much farther from us in the background. And then I'm going to add some shadows under those highlights, right? And immediately it looks like something there, like it's cars or it's something, you know? And now I'm marking the area around because I want to darken it. This lower section needs to be darker. So I'm just selecting. I'm using the select polygon tool, and I'm just selecting an area. And once I'm happy with my selection, I can choose a brush. In this case, it's going to be probably an airbrush, and I can just go over it and darken it. On the one hand, very gently, but also very significantly if I want to. And I'm not going to get outside these bounds because I mark them, right? So that's another element of ease of use. Now, I got some hard edges, right? So I'm alleviating them with just a few touches, and I can also later mark that area and do some blur, which I like. I like using Gaussian blur. It looks really good. So now let's play around with those highlights and effects, because again, I took this picture through a bus's window. So you get these refractions of the light and little dots of highlight that would be very hard to paint physically, you know, in any medium. But once I start adding those in, you'll see how it develops this blurry feel to it, right? And this is a beautiful effect, and all you have to do really is use a soft airbrush and boom, 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 and you got it, and it feels so good. So now I'm gonna just apply a blur on all of the background because I feel like it's too many hard edges, and I honestly don't feel like dealing with going back and smoothing every edge. Now I'm adding with time-lapse a few flags that were hung up there from the building, which is very interesting. Look at how easy it was just putting in the highlights or the mid-values and then adding some shadows to them. Marking this spot of the road, darkening it with a soft brush, darkening that corner there next to between the cars, that should be darker too. Adding this beautiful, beautiful highlights on the body of the car, and you can get that swoosh effect of the, that feeling of speed. If you do, you can do a lot of beautiful atmospheric work, highways in the dark, things like that become much more accessible. And if anything, this encourages me to try and do the same thing with watercolor physically, because that's something I've been wanting to explore. Bringing back the highlight around that shadow caused by the mirror, right? Adding some highlights on the mirror. And again, at this point, I'm having fun. I'm going like totally alla prima approach. Look at these beautiful bluish, kind of muted blue. And look at how muted my blue is. Details, nuances in the dark, much, much easier to do this way. Because, I have trouble with the darker side of the scale sometimes and really capturing the nuance there. So that's a a very interesting thing. And this actually teaches you, because then you'll kind of recognize the patterns when you paint physically. I added the license plate. Didn't even want to add too many details. Honestly, this one is done. So I'm super happy with it, and the hybrid approach I kind of took near the end. And I hope seeing this process encourages you to give this a try as an explorative tool, as a just creation tool in and of itself. And now let's wrap it up.
So thank you so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. And honestly, I've been getting quite a lot of sponsorship requests and emails, and I've been passing on most of them just because I feel like the product isn't a good match, or it's not good enough, or it's not something I care to use. Luckily, with Clip Studio Paint, I have been using them for 2 years now, and it helped me a lot. And funny enough, you may find that some of your traditional skills improve. For me, my color matching, you probably noticed, has improved over the last couple of weeks, and I think it's because of a lot of digital color matching. Don't know exactly how that works, but it actually somehow worked. So be sure to check them out. Available on multiple platforms, and you can get up to 3 months of free use. Link here in the description box below. Use this to perfect your watercolor paintings before you even begin painting them. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next vid.